Main causes of World War One. As we all know, in Sarajevo, 1914, June, I believe it was, Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was shot by a Serbian terrorist, Gabrielo Princip, which started the powder cake of World War One and the shaping the 20th century as we know it, with the Cold War, World War Two, and many other things in the interwar years. But people tend to neglect. People say that's the main reason. Other people said it might be this and that. But these are what I would say, the definitive, most likely 10 out of 10 reasons why World War One started or got to the point where, because in the end Ferdinand was just the powder cake going boom. So these things led up to that. So we're going to go with the acronym of MAIN reasons. MAIN being militarism, alliances, imperialism / industrialism, because they kind of intertwine with each other, and nationalism. So we're going to start with M. So militarism. The Kaiser was pretty upset. He was even infuriated by the fact that Germany was a latecomer to the imperialist game, so they were a second-rate power, if you will. He couldn't even get ahead. He couldn't get ahead at that point in time. It was German unification, so he couldn't get point in time to rival or even outpace France or Britain at that point, especially Britain. He felt it was necessary to challenge his rivals in a way, especially during the Second Moroccan crisis, when the Germans sought to block France from completely controlling and putting the Moroccan port of Agadir under their sphere of influence. Wilhelm wanted to establish Germany as a great world power, and to do this he would have to embark on a rapid naval expansion, but with Germany's industrial boom, who was to stop them from making it happen? So then you got, but Britain was frightened that her naval superiority was going to be challenged, so a arms race, a Cold War, if you will, before the actual Cold War, of military tensions and build-ups and arms race began, spreading vast amounts of money, so much so that Wall Street will have to get in. Wall Street will have to help the war, especially as it broke out, because militaries at that point were basically on the edge of broke, especially 1915, 1916. So there was major spending on army, of course the navy, even the air corps at the time, which was still in its infancy, but it was getting a boost. Zeppelins, airplanes, reconnaissance planes, special forces, special machinery, special guns, and with this boost of industrial arms, it became a domino effect, where it was a domino effect as all nations, especially in the borders of Europe, started an arms build-up trying to keep ahead of the rest. But like all things, every weapon created was matched and outmatched, every division was matched and outnumbered, and it became an endless cycle, to the point where a rifle today will be matched and outclassed next year. So at that kind of time it became pointless, because you make a Guerre 98 with 5, the French have the Lebel with 8, the British make the Lewis gun with 47 rounds, the Germans make the Maschinengewehr 08, which had 100 rounds. So it was a constant cycle of pacing out space, and especially in the war, when deadlock set in, that's when the real fun began. So it was always this militarism building up in Europe, Okay, so while the arms race was going on, we're gonna go to A now. So while the arms race was going on, Chancellor von Bismarck was a understated, well, we're gonna say he was a pretty good political genius. It was until he was forced to quit by Kaiser Wilhelm. But he did create the alliance system to prevent wars in mainland Europe. So Germany allied itself with Austria-Hungary and Italy until 1915. But what can you do? And they were called the Triple Alliance at that point. But then the Ottomans came in at the start of 1914 and kind of make the Central Powers. So there you go. That's their alliance. And even making, well, I can't really say the ultimate. Let's go. But on the other side, there were Russia and France, scared of the Triple Alliance, especially the grand power of Germany, and made their two-way pact in 1894. But Britain was very firm on isolation and was kind of like the US, didn't really want to get into mainland Europe squabbles. But with the great power of Germany growing and the naval arms race, it was apparent that Britain couldn't sit on the sidelines and just watch anymore. So Britain signed a triple alliance with France, Russia, and of course itself. And they had a small alliance with Japan, because I stated just now, they weren't too keen on alliances. So I just put Japan in there, why not? So there was a system in place. So we have the Triple Entente Cordiale, and we have the Central, aka Triple Alliance, before 1914. But even then, with this Triple Alliance, this Armageddon, this M.A.I.N, mutually assured destruction, generals were still making plans to invade other countries. Notable plans include Plan 17 by the French and the Schlieffen Plan by the Germans, of course. And like I said in the beginning of this, it was that fateful day in Sarajevo when Austria attacked, Russia mobilized, Germany declared war on Russia, France, Germany, knowing that France would come to Russia's aid, marched through Belgium. Britain sent the ultimatum to Germany. Germany ignored it. By historical accounts, there might be some backwaters, and when Britain, France, and Germany get into war, that's pretty much the whole world, all their empires, even Russia, the empire. And soon, that one fateful day in Sarajevo created a domino effect where once the Europeans went to war, the whole world went to war. And that was a nice segue, because now we're going to go into imperialism. So that was a pretty good segue. In the interwar years, of course, through even before the 18th century, or 19th century, sorry, Gregorian calendar. Anyway, during the 19th century, in the interwar years, it was relatively peace and great prosperity, as magazines and newspapers advertised and displayed the luxuries and technologies of today. So why should the hard-working businessman settle for a donkey and a cart when he could trade that in for a new automobile? Or why does the woman have to wash all day and not have fun for herself? Trade that washboard in for a washing machine. Why not? And with this wealth and prosperity, it kind of relied on two things. I like to call it the two I's, but M.A.I.N doesn't spell with two I's, but industrialism and more prominently imperialism. So it's imperialism, but I like to have the two I's. It was the golden age at that point for European imperialism. By the 1900s, the powers of Europe controlled almost 90% of Africa, except for Liberia and Ethiopia, even though Liberia was kind of a US protectorate, but we'll skip that. Controlled a lot of Asia, especially a lot of states in China, India, a lot of places, New Guinea, all those places, a lot of Asia, and especially in the Caribbean, mostly between the French and the British, and like one or two Dutch, but by that time the Dutch kind of fell off, and a lot of places in the Pacific, including Australia and New Zealand, and like I just stated, New Guinea, kind of in Asia. But anyway, they basically controlled all of the world except the US and literally the whole China. So that's basically how far they went. But with this growing reliance on imperialism and colonies, laid a dormant, well, not dormant, but dependency on them, because without the colonies, they cannot have the raw materials to produce and manufacture the goods they need. And on top of that, while we were discussing in the French Empire episode last week, to maintain distant vast colonies, especially mostly jungle, mostly desert, was a very costly affair. So you're pouring money into that, then you have to try and keep it very good for investors and try and make the market good in there. So at this point, imperialism was shaky. It was at the height in the 1920s, but after all those underlying problems with the dependency on the colonies, it was kind of shaking down. And another thing, it was basically a rivalry. It was like, I can get more colonies than you. No, Germany, you can't get more colonies than me. And it was a bit, it was an extension of militarism, but abroad. So at this point, it was an imperial rivalry to see who can get the most colonies, the most resources, the most trade routes, the most market, and that was basically the imperial rivalry. And especially with the militarism and the naval power, Britain being threatened by this, especially in India, where the prominence of imperialism relied on one thing. It was tea. During the Dutch and English trade routes before colonization and all of that good stuff, the British and Dutch travellers brought back tea from India, and it was very luxurious. But when there were several rebellions in India and Britain took control of India, tea was dispersed to everyone. So in the beginning, tea was like a high-class, luxury, aristocratic drink, and now by 1880, anybody could be drinking tea. Even the people that have the clean chimneys could drink tea on the evening. So that was the wealth and prosperity of the empire. But also, when you have to depend on this empire for your money, your resources, your wealth, your markets, your trade routes, it becomes apparent that with the greatest strength, there's also a great weakness. And we'll get into a quote before we finish. You know, we love to finish with quotes. We have to finish nationalism. Nationalism is very self-explanatory. Back in the day, during the knights and kings and actual nobles, when kings used to be the government, it was a very peasant-like. Well, let me try and explain it because I didn't write it down. So, nationalism derived from people living off the land, so people were very attached to the land. So, in essence, back in the medieval eras, nationalism was kind of nationalism before nationalism. People were attached to the ground. They would die for that land. They plowed the ground. They plowed the land. They were allegiances to the kings and the aristocrats of the era. And as nationhoods and nation states began to appear during the 15th and 16th century, nationalism really took root, especially among the governments that can exploit this peasant, because at that time peasants were very uneducated and basically were attached to the land because that's all they had. So being willing to die for the fatherland was kind of already in their thought process, but the governments just made it into a national fervor, making them want to die for the motherland and the fatherland, especially in Serbia, which had the Pan-Slav kind of nationalism where even though you're not part of Russia, you still kind of speak Russian, you still kind of know the Orthodox religion, you still know some cultures, some dances, some dishes, some food. So during this time, especially when the Austro-Hungarians were going deeper and deeper into the Balkans and the Balkan Wars were now over, these Slav kind of Balkan states were seeing it as their right to either join like the UK, Great Britain as one national unity, and well, that's not really a good example, like Germany and the unification of Germany, the unification of Italy and all Italians in that realm where everyone spoke the same culture, not spoke the same culture, spoke the same language, had the same kind of basic culture, had the same kind of cuisine and food. So at this point in Europe, everybody was trying to unify or dissolve themselves from a union, especially when Serbia looked at the Austrian-Hungarian Empire going into Sarajevo, into the Balkans. They wanted kind of a Slav state because the Serbian motto, well, kind of unofficial motto, was wherever dwells a Serb, there is a Serbia. So they were really intent on getting a Yugoslav, pan-Slav state in the Balkans, which turned into Yugoslavia, but it kind of didn't work out because during World War II was when nationalism really took like center stage. It is M-I-N-A for Maine, M-A-I-N for Maine, but it wasn't really nationalism. It was like the unification of states and the dissolution of states. So in the end, Yugoslavia didn't last because look at Yugoslavia: Macedonians, Croatians, Czechs, Poles, Slavs, Slovenes, Serbs, even some Muslims, are Albanians, all those kind of cultures. So in the end, nationalism didn't really work, but it was kind of the powder cake for the Yugoslav pan-Slav state. So that is M, militarism, A, alliances, I, imperialism / industry, kinda, and N, nationalism. Nationalism wasn't really written, but I know what was going on in the nationalism part, so bear with me on that kind of ranty thing, but that was basically nationalism was the main powder cake of World War One. I barely got this video out, so hope you like it. Gonna edit it now. You know how I like to go meta, and that's basically it. Enjoy yourself, learn something, and I wasn't really rushed, but you gotta tell I didn't write shit for nationalism, so enjoy the N. I will link you to documentaries, so don't you worry if you got a test. Don't you worry, you'll know what N is, so don't you worry. And I got you covered on N, my dude. So learn something, be good, and I'm gonna cook myself some food and edit. Probably take a bath, get real meta in here, because I like to talk for no apparent reason. So learn something and stop extending this video. Laters, guys.